Masechet Sukkah, Daf Yod Dalid. We have two main topics today. We're going to finish off talking about handles and whether the handles of hay are part of the actual grain or not as it relates to sekhakh. And then the next Mishnah is going to be talking about boards, large boards of wood, and whether they can be used, in what cases they can or cannot be used as sekhakh. So I'm going to review the last points that we made regarding the handles. The basic halacha is that grain, food, does become tameh when it gets wet. And generally not the leafy parts. Those cannot become tameh because they're not food. However, a yadot, something that is a handle, something that is used to hold the fruit, does also join together to become tameh. If one part becomes tameh, then the fruit, and vice versa. Okay, so that's the general rule. And then we saw a couple of exceptions. Rabbi Abba said one exception is if you have vines that you harvested for winepress vines, those vines are not part of the grape because you'd rather they were not there. They're not helpful. You're not eating the grapes, that you want to hold it and be able to eat it easily. The vines soak up the precious wine, and so you don't want the vines there. Therefore, the vines do not join in and are not part of the grape. They do not become tameh. That was his chidush. Rabbi Menashiah says, when you're going to use hay for sekhakh, you harvest it to begin with for sekhakh. That hay is not part of the grain because grain is non-kosher sekhakh. Grain is edible and cannot be used as sekhakh. And the hay is the good part of the sekhakh that is separate. And therefore, it's not part of it. However, Rabbi Abba disagreed there because he said, actually, you will benefit from the grain being part of the sekhakh because the grain is heavy and it holds down the sekhakh so it doesn't blow away so much. So that's the machloket between these two amoraim. And then the Gemara tried to match it up with a Baraita, with two Tanaim. They're also talking about the same case of hay and grain together that you use for sekhakh. And then the question is, well, if you have a lot of grain, more grain than the rest of it, that's no good because grain is not kosher sekhakh. So you need a majority of not. So the majority of not, Tanna Kamma says, has to be more hay than the actual grains. Good. So in other words, according to him, the hay, no part of the hay joins in with the grains. All of the hay counts against the grain. So that matches up with Menashiah. Aherim, however, say that there has to be more hay than grain plus the handles of the grain. The part that's close to the grain that you would use to hold it, to handle it, that joins in with the grain. So there has to be a lot more other hay in order for that to be kosher sekhakh, that you have more kosher than non-kosher. So you see, according to this, the handles are considered part of the grain, and that would fit with Rabbi Abba, who disagrees here, and he thinks that also it becomes tameh. Even though using it for sekhakh, the handles also become tameh with the grain. So that's where we left it. It seems that they can match up in this way. Now, we also said that Rabbi Abba matches with Aherim. There's really no other way around that. But we wanted to try to save Rabbi Menashiah, and so that he's not only following Tanna Kamma, but that he should be following Aherim also. Is it possible to match him up with both? And we say yes. Maybe, in fact, both Tanaim here agree that the handles are not part of the grain. And so what case are they talking about? When a person, when he first harvested it, he had intended it to be for food. He says, we're going to cut this grain, I'm going to make bread out of it. And so because he intends it for food, therefore, it's part of it. The grain and the handles are together. And that explains Aherim. However, this person then changed his mind and says, you know what? I want to use it for sekhakh. So Aherim says, no, you intended it for food to begin with. So you're going to have to do something more than just change your mind. You're going to have to actually do something and act in a way that shows that you want to use it for something else. Tanna Kamma seemed to say that it's sufficient to just change your mind, even though at first you had in mind for food. And as food, the handles would join with the grain. But once you change your mind and say, you know what, I want to use it for sekhakh, and in that case, you don't want the grain there. It's not very important. Therefore, then it changes status, and the handles are no longer connected to the grain. And that way, the Menashiah actually could agree with both Tanna Kamma and Aherim. That is the point at which we left off. And so now we begin the Gemara. It's the very end of Yud Gimel Amud Bet. So, I kosesan achila, mai ta'amaihu derabanan. So if in fact, when you first harvested, you had in mind, I'm going to use it for food, and since it's for food, therefore the handles do join the grain. Well, in that case, what's the reason that Rabbanan think that it doesn't join once I decide to use it for sekhakh? And maybe you'll say, according to Rabbanan, if I change my mind, it changes the status. At first, I harvest it for food. So as food, the grain has handles that are connected to it. When I change my mind for sekhakh, that changes the status. And now the grains are irrelevant and they're separate from the handles. So would that be the opinion of Rabbanan? That's a problem. Can someone just change the status by changing one's mind? Is that sufficient? We see in this case the following Mishnah from Masechet Kelim that is not sufficient. כל הכלים יורדים לידי טומאה במחשבה, ואין עולים מטומאתן אלא בשינוי מעשה. Any vessel can become susceptible to tum'ah through thought. In other words, if I have a piece of leather and working on the leather, and then I make it flat, and I say, I'm going to use this for a placemat on my table. And so then I decide that I'm finished with it. So that's it. Once I decide I'm done with it, it becomes susceptible to tum'ah. Now, what if I change my mind and they say, you know what? I don't want to use it as a placemat anymore. I want to take this piece of leather and make shoes out of it. Well, just changing my mind is not sufficient. I have to actually start working on it. Shinui ma'aseh. I have to go and start cutting it and repolishing it as shoes. Once I do that, then it will lose its status as a vessel, no longer be susceptible to tumah until I finish making the shoes. So therefore, you see, machshava is enough to make it chamur, to make it a vessel and susceptible to tumah, but thought alone is not enough to undo it. This is the principle. Maaseh mosi, miyad maaseh, umiyad machshava. An action can undo an action or a thought. Machshava ena mosi'ah lo midei maaseh ve'lo midei machshava. But thought alone does not change the status that was established by action or even just by thought. And so therefore, since that is the principle, back to Rabbanan, just because when I harvested the grain, I had in mind for food, its status is going to be food, and the handles will be connected to the grain as long as I don't do an action to change it, somehow separate it, then it will change. But by thought alone, it won't. And according to this, Rabbanan said, thought alone changes the status. So that is the question. Now here's, we're going to attempt a quick answer. Look at this distinction between the two cases. Regarding a vessel, like that piece of leather, that's an important item. And so I decided I'm going to use this as a tabletop. And then I say, oh no, I'm going to use it as shoes. Since that's an important, a significant item, I have to do something new in order to change its status. But handles, the handle is not food. The handle is only helping me eat the food. So really, the handle shouldn't be tameh in the first place. It's only secondarily susceptible to tumah because it helps me hold the food. So therefore, yadot are less significant. And maybe you'll say, for handles, it's enough just to have thought to undo another thought. So you're right. I had in mind I was going to use it for food. Then I changed my mind. It's not good enough for a vessel to change my mind. I have to do an action. But for a handle, that's not really tameh in the first place. But in and of itself, maybe thought works. Okay, that's an interesting thought. But we're going to reject that too from another Mishnah. So machshava nase, machshava salka. So yadot, I would think thought is enough to make it and remove it. This is from a Mishnah in Okasin that says, Kol yedot ha'ochelin shebisasan bagoren tehorot. If I took grain from the field, right, I cut it in the field, I bundled it up in the field, and then I bring it to the threshing floor. And at the threshing floor, I thresh it, right? Meaning I step on it and separate the kernels from the rest of the chaff, the hay. So when I did that, it becomes tahor because now they're separated. I show that I don't want the handles to be connected to the grain. Beforehand, I wanted it to be connected because in order to transfer the kernels from the field to here, I need to bundle it up. And I can only bundle it up if it's connected to the hay. I can't carry all those separate kernels. So beforehand, I wanted it. And now that I did some threshing, I did an action, and that undoes it. Rabbi Yosef metameh. We'll see in a second why Rabbi Yosef disagrees and says even during the threshing, it still remains tameh. Okay, now this Mishnah, there's two opinions about it. We're actually going to see the source of these two opinions on the bottom of the Amud, but we're quoting it now, we're assuming that we know it. So the machloket is about the definition of this word, besasan. Bishlama lemanda amar besasan hitir igudan shapir. One opinion says besasan just means you take the bundle of hay and you undo it. You open it up. You untie the binding. In that case, I didn't do anything. I didn't yet thresh. I didn't yet separate the grain. I just untied it. By untying it, it's really only a change in machshava. I'm showing, you know what? I don't want to hold it together anymore. I don't need the handles to hold it anymore because I'm about to do threshing. So that's equivalent to thought. And according to this, thought can change a thought. And so according to that opinion, that would be, Rabbanan would be fine. But another opinion says the word besasan means I have to actually thresh it. I have to do an action. Beforehand, when I harvested it, I wanted the handles to be there, so they're connected to the grain. And now, only after I actually thresh it and separate them, that's when it becomes, it loses its status as handles and it becomes not susceptible to tumah anymore. So according to that, I have to do an action to undo a thought, even for handles, not only for vessels. So then how will you answer that? And the final answer is that Baraita with Tanna Kamma and Aherim was also talking about a case where one did an action and changed it. I got the things from the field and I had in mind I'm going to eat them, I'm going to use it for food, and then I say, you know what, I want to use it for sekhakh, and as sekhakh, I smash it down, get rid of some of the grain, and so I actually do an action, in fact, to change its status. Okay, good. Now, ihachi, maita mayde aherim. So Aherim say, right, if we remember, this was Aherim say that the handles remain part of the grain. Wait a second, if I did an action and I separated them, so then why does it remain connected according to Aherim? So the answer is Damur ke Rabbi Yosef, Ditnan Rabbi Yosef mitameh. So Aherim can fit with Rabbi Yosef in the Mishnah in Okasin because he said tameh. Now we're going to learn why he said tameh in the first place. Haimai. Bishla mahatam tamad Rabbi Yosef, Chazya leched Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, tamad Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, ho'il veru'uyot lehofchan be'ater. Rabbi Yosef follows this line of reasoning that even after I do the threshing, so let's review the case. I went and I harvested in the field. I bound it together and I wanted the hay attached to the grain so that I can bind it together. It was useful as a handle. Now I bring it to the threshing floor and I have the animal step on it and now it's separated. So doesn't that show that now I don't want the handles to be there, right? And it's separated? Yes, that's what Tanna Kamma says, but Rabbi Yosef says, I still actually want the hay to be there so I could turn it over with a pitchfork. Here's a pitchfork, and during the threshing process, you need to flip it over or mix it up in the middle of the process. Now, if the kernels are all separated, there's no way to mix them up. I kind of need the hay, even as they're basically detached. I still need the hay there to be able to flip it over, so they're still helpful somewhat. Okay, good. So that explains the Biyose's opinion in the Mishnah in Okasin, but that doesn't explain why Aherim in this, but in our Baraita would still consider them connected. What use does it have? He's not flipping, he's not threshing, he's not flipping them over. He's using them as sekhakh. So ela hacha lemay chazia. Answer: Chazia lechi satar liminkat lehu begilayhu. It's suitable so that when you take down the sekhakh, so it'll be easy to handle. So remember, you have the sekhakh there, has some grain in it, but it has mostly hay. But even that grain could be helpful because it holds it down. And when you're dismantling it, imagine dismantling all the kernels by themselves. No, you want it connected because it's easy to dismantle. So it actually does have some benefit even then. Okay, that is the conclusion. After we finished, we just go back and we mentioned this word bisasan and two opinions. Now we're bringing the original source. We didn't name them before. So we say gufa, kol yadot ha'achalin shebisasan begoden teorot v'Rabbi Yoseh metameh. So gufa usually takes, we have a snippet before, and now we bring the full source. Usually gufa applies to an Amoraic statement or even a Baraita. Very rarely does it apply to a Mishnah, because a Mishnah, usually you'd go to the Mishnah wherever it is, and that's where the main discussion will be. But this Mishnah is in Okasin at the end of Tehorot. There is no Talmud, not Bavli, not Yerushalmi for Tehorot. So Rashi says here, that's why this is anomalously brings a gufa for a Mishnah, because this is there's nowhere else to put this. So we bring it here. This is the main discussion of it. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. Now we ask, my besasan, what does the word besasan mean? Rabbi Yosef Amar besasan mamash. It means actually threshing and starting to separate it. Rabbi Eliezer medhetir agadan. He just says, no, it just means untying the binding, and that is sufficient. And once you untie the binding, already the handles are considered no longer connected because you don't need them anymore in order to handle it when it's tied. Bishlama Rabbi Eliezer daman besasan yatir agadan hainu demitameh Rabbi Yosef. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you're just untying it, so then we understand why Rabbi Yosef would disagree. He says you only untied it. You didn't do anything to the actual grain. You didn't change the status, right? So therefore, he would be machmir. Ela Rabbi Yochanan damar besasan mamash amay metameh Rabbi Yosef. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that says you brought it in from, and then you actually threshed. You actually separated the chaff from the kernels. So why would you still say that the handles can become tameh? Like they're still attached and still important? Why would it be Yosef metameh? Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish v'riyot lehofchan be'ayater. Here's the original place where he says it. Since you can overturn it, it's useful for turning over with the pitchfork. So that's why it's still there. That's why Rabbi Yosef says we still need the chaff even after threshing. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, lama nimshalat tefilatan shel tzadikim ke'ayater. Okay, now we have a little agada. How come the prayer of tzadikim is like a ayater, is like a pitchfork, as it says in the pasuk, vaye'atar Yitzhak lenochach ishto ki al karahi. So pasuk uses the word vaye'atar, same root as ayater, pitchfork, to mean prayer. What's the similarity between a pitchfork and prayer? לומר לך, מה היתר זה מהפך את התבואה בגודל ממקום למקום, אף תפילתן של צדיקים מהפך את דעתו של הקדוש ברוך הוא ממידת אכזריות למידת רחמנות. So just like a pitchfork in a granary can move around and flip over the grain, so too the prayers of righteous people can turn around, flip over the decision of God from a midah, from an attribute of cruelty to an attribute of mercy. So that's the parallel. This is very interesting. Usually we have midat hadin to midat rahamim, and we understand those two midot. Midat hadin is justice, right? Justice is fair, but we're asking God to go beyond and to be merciful. It's unusual to call midat hadin midat achzariyut, as if God is trying to be cruel, right? I mean, why would you say that God is trying to be cruel? Maybe, but it is parallel. Some explain that, what midat hadin? What did Rivka do wrong that she deserved a judgment of being barren. It's not even midat hadin. So that's why in applying to Yitzchak and Rivka, her barrenness is called midat achzariyut, because it's not based on a judgment that was because of sin or anything like that. Anyway, that's a very interesting word there. And that's nice to end off that discussion with the beautiful Agadah. And now we get to the next Mishnah. Next Mishnah is talking about using boards of wood, large boards, as sekhakh. Mesakechin b'nisarin dibre Rabbi Yehudah. Rabbi Yehudah says it's fine to use boards. Rabbi Meir oser, but not Rabbi Meir. Okay, so Rabbi Yehudah is more lenient. Rabbi Meir is the stringent one. Then there's part 2 of the Baraita. The relationship between part A and part B is not so clear. The Gemara will discuss. Natan aleha neser shehu rachav arba'at tefachim. Okay, a standard board that was used for building homes in that time would be 4 tefachim. Right, 4 tefachim, about 1 foot wide. So if you use a 4 tefach board, keshera, keshera means that the sukkah is kosher, but just don't sleep under that. How come it says sleep and not eat? The answer is because eating, you can eat a snack outside the sukkah, but sleeping, you can't even sleep at all outside the sukkah. So if it's 4, let's see if we have a picture that can help us here. So this is Rabbi Yehudah. You have nisarim, right? We're going to talk about how big are these nisarim. I mean, the standard neser, standard board is 1 foot. So can these all be 1 foot? Is it less than 1 foot? What exactly we're talking about? But the point is that, you don't need just bamboo poles. You can use something that's a little thicker. How thick? Even a neser, something that usually you'd put in a house. So Rabbi Yehudah says it's okay, and Rabbi Meir says it's not good. And the second part, if you're sitting under, if it's exactly 4 tefachim, you can't sit under it, but it doesn't make the sukkah pasul, right? So in other words, even over here, they picture it on the side, she says it, even if it's in the middle, we're going to talk about this, even if it's in the middle, it's only 4 tefachim, or maybe a little less, depending on the machloket coming up, it will be continuous. It won't be a separation. If it's more than 4 tefachim, and in the middle, everyone would agree that you no longer have a sukkah because you have 2 walls, you have no sekhakh and 2 walls, and there's too big a separation. So that would not be good. But if it's a certain amount, 3, 4, then maybe you can't sit under it, but it will not ruin the sukkah. Okay, question?
Yeah, I'm just curious. So does that imply that we can use 2x4s as long as there's enough sun coming in?
Yes, 2x4s would be sufficient. It's only 4. That's only 1 tefach, 1 and a little. So 2x4s is okay. And they're nice and heavy, so they won't blow away at least. But leave some space between a little bit. Okay, good. Yeah, it's a good point. Probably people don't do it because maybe it's too heavy. It's a little hard to handle. Maybe it doesn't look so pretty either. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. Now, Gemara. We're going to have a machloket between Rav and Shmuel. Let me show you the outline first. Okay, we're going to have machloket Rav and Shmuel concerning the Mishnah. According to Rav, he's going to be the more lenient approach, and he's going to say that anything less than 4 tefachim is fine, right? That's called a pole. Anything less than 4 tefachim, you can use it, put them all in a row. It's all good, like that picture. If it's 4 exactly. Why are we obsessing with 4 exactly? Because that was a standard board. So if it's 4 exactly, then the Yehudah says it's kosher. The Meir says it is not kosher. You cannot sleep under it. Although exactly 4, you can still put it there, and it won't posel the whole sukkah. Shmuel is going to be a little bit more stringent, and he's going to say less than 3 is totally kosher. From 3 to 3.9 to just under 4, that's where the controversy is. Rabbi Yehudah says it's kosher. Rabbi Meir says it's pasul. And if it's 4 exactly, then don't sleep under it, but you can leave it there. Anything more than 4 is no good at all. So let's see this inside. It takes a couple of steps to get to this understanding. Amarav, machloket b'nesirim sheyesh behen arba'ah. The machloket between Rabbi Meir, Yehudah, and Rabbi Meir is when there is exactly 4 tefachim. The Rabbi Meir itle gezerat tikra. What's the problem with 4? Rabbi Meir says it's a gezerah. If I let you use boards that are 4 and use the same thing in your house, then you're going to say, what's the point of sitting in a sukkah? I'll just sit in my house. It's made out of the same thing. So therefore, it's no good. You see, the problem can't be that it's sekhakh pasul because it grows from the ground and it's not mekabel tumah. Wood that's flat, that doesn't hold anything, is not a vessel, is not mekabel tumah. So technically, it should be good sekhakh even if it's bigger. So that's why he explains it's a gezerah of a tikra that it looks like the same roofing material we use in our house. Rabbi Yehudah doesn't worry about that. You're going to confuse your sukkah with your house, and therefore he says yes, it can be 4 tefachim big, and you can use that all right the whole sukkah. If it's less than 4, everybody says have a good day. You can use all of them. All of them can be 3.9. Okay. Ushmuel amar. So that's all Rav. Shmuel amar b'she'en behen arba machloket. He says when there's less than 4, that's where there's a machloket. If it's exactly 4, everyone says it's no good. They would all agree with the gezerat tikra. Less than 4, then it's okay. Now, and behen arba'a v'afilu pachot mishelosha. So that was what Shmuel said. Now we're going to clarify Shmuel's opinion. You said less than 4 is a machloket. Wait a second. How much less than 4? Even less than 3 tefachim? Hakanim ba'almaninu. If it's less than 3, it's just a stick. It's just a pole, right? That's all of our sekhakh is something that's less than 3. So then what else could you use? If you say less than 3 is a machloket, then according to the Meir, you wouldn't be able to use anything for sekhakh. So the Papa explains. Amar Papa, Hachi Kamar, Yesh Behen Arba'a, Dibra Kol Pisula. 4 is no good, and anything above that for sure no good. Pachot Mishelosha, Dibra Kol Keshara. Less than 3 is totally fine. That's a regular pole. My Tama Kanim Be'almaninu. Ki pelige Mishelosha ad Arba'a. The machloket between the Meir and the Yehudah is between 3 until 4, just less than 4. Mor Savar. Rabbi Yehudah says, he says, since it's not called a makom for like Hilchot Shabbat, to make it a shut hayachid, it has to be 4 by 4. That's considered a place. Anything less than that is not a place. So there's no reason to make a gezerah that's going to look like a house. Whereas Rabbi Meir, who's Machmir, he says, 3 and less than 3 is lavud. So it's all considered nothing. So therefore, a pole that's big is not taking up a lot of space. It's within the law of lavud. So, I mean, you don't need lavud because we need poles there, right? But the poles are not taking up space. Just like lavud, anything less than 3 is not considered significant. But if it's more than 3, then it's already a significant amount of space. And then we do apply the gezerah that it going to look like roofing. And so that's the reasons for their machloket. Okay, good. So now that we understand the 2 opinions of Rav and Shmuel, we're going to see 2 challenges to Rav, then a support for Rav, and then a support for Shmuel. So let's see the first challenge to Rav. Tenan. Natan aleha neses shehu rachav arba'a tefachim keshera. The first challenge is from the Sefer of our Mishnah that says if you put a board that's 4 tefachim, it's good. That's kosher, but just don't sleep under it, right? If you have it there in the middle of the sukkah somewhere, it connects the rest of the sekhakh together, so the sukkah is kosher, but that spot is no good. Now, this all is understandable according to Shmuel, who was more machmir. And he said, if there's less than 4, that's the machloket. But if there's 4 exactly, that's what the Sefer is talking about. When there's 4 exactly, everyone agrees pisula. So why shouldn't you sleep under it? So the Sefer is going to everybody. This is pasul. Don't sleep under it. Good. So that all makes sense. Ela l'Rav. He said if there's 4, that's a machloket. According to him, even if it's 4, it's still okay according to the Yehudah. So why shouldn't you sleep under it if it's 4? The Yehudah says that that's okay. So the answer is, did you think the sefa was everyone's opinion? It was only the Meir's opinion. Let me show you back in the Mishnah. Right, first we brought the opinion of the Yehudah, then the Meir, and so Rav is saying that the continuation is a continuation of the Meir's words. He says nesarim are no good, and therefore, if it's four tefachim exactly, the Sukkah is kosher, but you can't sleep under that itself. Whereas Rabbi Yehudah, he said that it's totally fine, it's kosher sekhakh, and so the sefa is in fact the Rabbi Meir's opinion, according to Rav. Good. So he solved that, he answered that challenge. Okay, next challenge to Rav. Tashema, shene sadinim mitztarfin, shene nesarin en mitztarfin. Rabbi Meir omer af nesarin kisdinin. Okay, so if you have 2 sheets that are less than 4 tefachim, they join together to make one big sheet. We have a picture here. There's the picture. Okay, so over here, these are sheets, right? So I have a sheet that's only 2 tefachim. That's okay. If I had only 2 tefachim in the middle of the sukkah, I say lavud, I can sit under it, it's okay. But if I have a two tefach sheet and another 2 tefach sheet, so they join together as if they're one big 4 tefach sheet or more. Let's say it's 3 and 3 or 2.5 and 2.5, right? They're joined together to make a section that's more than 4, and that would be 4 tefachim, and then it would make the whole. First of all, you couldn't sit under it if it was 4, and if it was more than 4, it would make the whole thing pasul. That's true for sheets, and everyone agrees with that. The machloket, however, is regarding wooden planks. Do wooden planks, if they're each a certain size, we're going to have to talk about how big we're talking about, do they join together? So Tanna Kamma says 2 smaller planks, yes, they join together and make it considered a big plank, and that would be a problem. And Rabbi Meir says, after nesarim, right? So nesarim don't. Okay, so Tanna Kamma says there's a distinction between sheets and wood. Sheets do join together. Wood doesn't join together because wood, each one can be considered by itself. So we're assuming they're all sufficient to be good sekhakh, and so you can have many of them. But Rabbi Meir says they do join together. So Rabbi Meir once again is more machmir and says he doesn't like planks. Okay, nobody likes planks. I could do one for 20 seconds, but not longer. All right, so that's to be Meir. Now, Bishlama li Shmuel, that's the Baraita. We're going to try to explain it according to each. This Baraita makes sense according to Shmuel. Damar, b'she'en behen arba'a machloket. אבל יש בין 4 דברי הכל פסולה, מה mistarfin ל4. So if you're talking about a case where, let's say if 2 and 2, so if they're sheets are not are mekabel tuma, and 2 plus 2 is going to be 4, definitely is not going to be good, not according to anybody. But if they're made out of wood, then it would make sense that this is a machloket, right? The Tanna Kamma would follow the Yehudah and sees he would say in the case of planks 2 and another 2, it's not mistaref because it's fine. You can have, even if it's 4, you can put them all together. And the Meir would say it's no good. He would say 2 and 2 together mistarfin le4. According to Rav, who is more lenient, and he says even if there was 4 there, according to the Yehudah, that would be okay. So what kind of case? How big is each of these wooden planks? If they are in fact 4 each, then why do they have to be joined together? Even if they're 4, even if each one is 4 handbreadths wide, it's each one by itself is going to make it pasul, according to the Meir. So you don't have to bother saying that 2 together, even one by itself. If it's less than 4, we said according to Rav, less than 4 is kosher sekhakh according to everyone. So why would you say it's mistaref? If I have a lot of bamboo poles, they're not mistaref. So anything less than 4 is kosher sekhakh. So we don't understand this Baraita according to Rav. So here's the answer. Leolam di'it behu arba'a. Umay mistarfin la arba'a amot min hasad. In fact, yes, we're talking about a case where there are each plank has 4 tefachim, and so according to the Yehudah, that would be okay. According to the Meir, it would not be okay. And even one by itself wouldn't be okay. But we're not talking about when it's in the middle, but rather when it's close to the wall. And you see, we change arba'ah to arba. Arba is referring to amot. That's nekeva. So we're talking about joining together to make 4 amot, and the picture will make this all clear. So we're talking about a case like this. So even according to the Meir, if I have a plank of 4 tefachim on the side next to the wall, that's okay, because I could say dofen akuma. And now how far can I use dofen akuma? 4 amot. That's the maximum. Any more than 4 amot, already I cannot apply dofen akuma. So here's what the Baraita is saying. According to Rav, he can explain it this way, that all these that are 4 amot, none of them are good in and of themselves, and they do join together to make a dofen akuma, such that if you had any more than that, then it would be prohibited. The whole sukkah would not be good. It's too far away from the wall. And so that is the answer. This answer that we just said, we have another version of it. This other version says basically the same thing. It's just in slightly different words. Lishana acharina, bishlama lishmuel, damar beshen behen arba'a machloket. Avesh ben arba'a divrei hakol pesula. My mistarfin arba'a amot min hasad. According to Shmuel, this Baraita that is talking about that 2 planks that join together. And since Shmuel said when it's less than 4, that's the machloket. But if there is 4, everyone says pasul. So what case is it joining together? Joining together when they're big planks, 4 tefachim, and they're joining on the side wall. In other words, the thing that we just left off with. Now that we know that, we could use it for Shmuel too, right? Shmuel can say that's what mistarfin means, that they're mistaref to make a dofen akuma, so you could have 4 amot of it, but not more. Ela l'Rav bishlam Rabbi Meir, my mistarfin arba amot min hasad. So that explanation works according to Rav in the opinion of Rabbi Meir, mistaref to make 4 amot. Ela Rabbi Yehudah damar afilu yesh behen arba'a keshera, but Rabbi Yehudah, see, this is Rav and Rav according to Rabbi Yehudah. This is the lenient of the lenient. In this opinion, 4 tefachim is kosher sekhakh. So you could make the whole sukkah out of 4 tefachim boards, and there would be no problem. So why would you even talk about such a case that is close to the wall or mistaref to what? What could possibly be the problem? According to that opinion, these are just good sekhakh. You're right. Really, it's totally fine, and it's simple. You wouldn't have to say it. But since Rabbi Meir said they are mistaref, Rabbi Yehudah said and mistarfin, they don't join together, and yes, you can use them the whole way. And so really, Rabbi Yehudah wouldn't even have to talk about such a case. But since Rabbi Meir wanted to say he's machmir, so Rabbi Yehudah said and mistarfin. Okay. Good. So we finished the 2 challenges to Rav, and now we're going to bring a support to Rav and a support for Shmuel. Tanna Kamma Rav, Tanna Kamma Shmuel. Tanna Kamma Rav. Sekhakh benesarim shel erez she'en bahen arba'a. You have cedar boards. It doesn't really matter what it's made of. It just happens to be cedar boards, and that are less than 4 tefachim. Divrei hakol keshera. Everybody says it's fine. Yesh bahen arba'a. B'meir posel v'Rabbi Yehudah machshir. If there is exactly 4, then Rabbi Meir says no good. Rabbi Yehudah says it is good. That's exactly what Rav says. So good. Rav has a perfect baraita that supports him. Now we have a fun story. Amar Rabbi Yehudah ma'aseh b'shat sakana shehebenu nesarim shayu bahen arba'a v'sikachtu al gabe mirpeset. It was a time of danger when there was persecution and we couldn't show that we were sitting in a sukkah. So we didn't make the sukkah as we normally do. Instead, we took boards that were 4 tefachim and we put it on the porch. So it looked like it was like a regular roof, and so it wouldn't look like a sukkah. And we sat there. So you see, the Yehudah says, this supports me that 4 tefachim, using boards, 4 tefachim all the way across, is kosher. We did that once. Amru lo, misham re'aya, en shata sakana re'aya. That's your proof? That was a time of danger, it was emergency. So for emergency, okay, well, we have to cut corners a little. But normally, no, we would not follow that. It was not actually a kosher sukkah in a regular year. Okay, good. So we have a interesting story about danger and of sitting in Sukkot from persecution. Okay, now Tanna Kamma Shmuel. Here's the support on the other side. Sekhakh b'nesarim shel erez sheyesh behen arba'a dibra kol pesula. If it's 4 tefachim exactly these boards, everyone agrees it's not good. Right, the Sfal Shmuel, who's more stringent. And behen arba'a Rabbi Meir posel Rabbi Yehudah machshir. So if it's less than 4, meaning more than 3, between 3 and 4, that's the machloket. Umodeh Rabbi Meir she'im yesh ben neser neser kimlo neser shemeniach pesel benehem uchshera. And Rabbi Meir would agree that if you had a case like this, that you have 4 tefachim here, but you separate the 4 tefachims and you put good kosher sekhakh in between, then this sukkah is kosher. He would still say you can't sit under the 4 tefach boards, but let's say the middle here, that's fine, you can sit under it. So 4 tefachim is not kosher sekhakh, but it still holds together the kosher sekhakh, and it's not a big enough, any more than 4, that would be big enough to make a total separation. Question?
Yeah, so we keep talking about 4 tefachim because the average board used to be 4 tefachim back then, and the issue was gezerah. But does that mean, based on that opinion, that technically it could be, I don't know, 6 foot by 6 foot, whatever? It could be anything, really.
No, bigger than that would definitely not be good. No one considers that to be a pole, a board. A pole has to be made out of poles, not full building material. So 4 is exactly on the edge.
No, but I mean, you said that the reason is because of gezerah. Mm-hmm. So Rabbi Yehudah doesn't hold by it anyway. So according to Rabbi Yehudah,
well, he doesn't hold by it for 4. But if it was a full cement roof,
not cement, it's wood.
one
it has
piece,
to grow from the ground.
Then it is a house, right? It's not sekhakh at all anymore.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Umodeh Rabbi Yehudah she'im natan aleha neses shu rachab 4 tefachim keshera. Rabbi Yehudah would also agree that if you put something that was 4 tefachim, that's good. Ve'en yeshanim tachtav, ve'yashen tachtav lo yasa yedeh chovato. So, and you shouldn't sleep under it. If you did sleep under it, you did not fulfill your obligation. So anyway, this supports Shmuel's opinion. Okay, now we're going to get to a last case for today. Itemad hafachan al sidehen. Here's a good picture. If you took a 4 tefach board, but you made it upright, so that the part that's actually you see from underneath is on the short side. Maybe it's only 1 tefach or 2 tefachim. And so would that be okay, right? Is the problem because it's flat, or just because it's actually a board and just can't use this board as building material? Is that the problem, or is it because it's covering too much? And in this case, it's not covering too much. So this is a really interesting test case, right, to see what exactly is the problem. And so, if you do think it's a problem, then basically this building material looks like home building material, even if you put it upright and you have more space. So this is going to be a machloket. Rav Huna amar pesula. Rav Chisda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna amre keshera. Rav Chisda and Rabba, the son of Rav Huna. So this is interesting machloket between father and son. The father, Rav Huna, said pesula. Rabba, his son, says keshera. Okay, now you have to know the names because of the next story. Ikla Rav Nachman leSura. One time Rav Nachman went to Sura, where Rav Chisda and Rabba were. Rabba bar Rav Huna was Rosh Yeshiva in Sura. Rabba Rav Nachman was a great sage. If you remember, we had the story about these same people beforehand, where Rav Nachman, he was working for the Resh Galuta, and he put the other Rav Chisda in a difficult situation by putting him in a sukkah with things hanging down. Okay, so another story about them. But here everybody's nice to each other. Legabe Rav Chisda v'Rabba bar Rav Huna. So when Rav Nachman came to town, the other 2 sages who said keshera, they went to see Rav Nachman. Amrele hafachan sidehen mahu. What if we put them on the side? This case, what do you think? What's your opinion, Rav Nachman? Amalehu pesula naasu kishipudim shematechet. It's no good. You know why? Because it's like metal beams. In other words, because it's so thick and strong, it's already like a metal beam, and therefore it's no good. It can't be so big. Amar lehu Rav Huna, lo amri lechu amari kebati. So Rav Huna, all along he said pisula. They've been arguing with this for a generation, and so he said, "See, I told you so, right? See, Rav Nachman backed me up." Rav Huna says. So the other two rabbis, they say, Rav Huna, you, the master, did you give us a reason and we didn't accept your reason? You never were convincing. You didn't give us a good reason. You stated an opinion. So that's why we didn't agree with you. However, Rav Nachman, he said, because it's like shipudin. Oh, you're right. Now we understand the reason behind it. So that's why we agree with Rav Nachman and not you. Rav Huna counters, Omar lehu, mi ba'itu minai ta'ama v'la amri lehu. Did you ever ask me a reason and I didn't tell you? You were not even interested in even asking me a reason. So you should have asked and I would have told you and then you would have been convinced. Okay, almost done here. Lema mesayeh le, ena mechazeket kedei rosho v'ribo v'shulchano. O shnifresa ba pirsa kedei sheyiz דקר בגדי בבת ראש, או שנתן עליה נסר שהוא רחב 4 טפחים, אף על פי שלא הכניס לתוכה, אלא 3 טפחים פסולה. So here's a long Baraita, it's 3 different cases. If a sukkah is too small that it cannot hold most of your body and your head and your table, it's no good. Or if it has a hole in it that a goat can come through, that would be a case like this, where there's a hole on the bottom and a goat can come through. That's not a good wall. And the last case is if you put a nesed, if you put a board that is 4 tefachim, even if it does not cover 3 tefachim. So somehow there's a case of a board that's 4 tefachim wide, but it doesn't cover enough of the sekhakh. The part of the roof that it covers is only 3 tefachim. So how could you have a case if it's 4 tefachim wide that is only covering 3? Isn't it talking about a case where it is sideways? And that's exactly our case. And here it says pesula, and that would support Rav Nachman and Rav Huna. So hechidami, my love kigon shafachan al sidehem. Isn't this Baraita talking about a case where it is sideways? We say la hacha b'maiskinan kegon de anacha apuma dim talalta da'ayel telata legev ve'apek had lebar v'avale pesel hayosem min hasukkah v'o pesel hayosem min hasukkah nidon ka sukkah. We're actually talking about a case like this where that we have a 4 tefach board that we put at the edge of the sukkah, an edge where there's no wall. And in this case, it's overhanging 1 tefach and 3 tefachim are on it. So here's a case where you have a 4 tefach board, even though we're only using 3 of it for ourselves. And this is a case where we say that it is pasul, because there's another rule that a sekhakh that sticks out a little is still considered part of the sekhakh. What this here calls pesel. Hayosim na sukkah is still called part of the sukkah. In other words, if this was like kosher sekhakh and it sticks out a little, you can even use that, a little extension, even though there's no walls there. So since that is considered part of the sekhakh, so we do incorporate the full 4 tefachim, and because it's a full 4 tefachim, and that's too big, the whole thing is pasul, so we would not apply lavud to the 3 tefachim that are inside it. We add to the part. Anyway, it's talking about when it is in fact flat and not when it's upright, and therefore this baraita is not a proof. Okay, finally, halacha l'maaseh is that anything that's less than 3 of sekhakh pasul is fine. That's called lavud. You can sit under it. You can put it there. That's good for all kinds of lights and the bulbs and things like that. Is totally fine. However, if it's between 3 and 4, then it joins the sekhakh together, and so the sukkah is okay, but you cannot sit under that section. If it's 4 or more, a whole of 4, a bad sekhakh that's 4 or more, that will actually make a separation and make the whole sukkah pasul. So whatever beams that you do have, you have to make sure that they are definitely less than 4 tefachim. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.